I'd like to open up the May 22nd, 2015 Watertown Board of Adjustment. Roll call, please.
Stonebarger,
Present.
Arnold, absent. McGuire.
Here.
Shriver.
Here.
Stein.
Here.
Rhonda Johnson.
Here.
Bill Johnson.
Here.
Dan Albertson. Here. Blake Daly is absent. We have a quorum.
Thank you. First item on the agenda is the approval of the May 16th, 2015 minutes. I need a motion and a second.
Make a motion. Second.
Motion by Mr. McGuire, second by Mr. Stonebarger. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. The second item on the agenda is an applicant, Doug Mogg from Mogg Properties LLC, seeks a conditional use permit number 16099 in regard to a specific use office building at 101 and 103 19th Street Northeast.
All right. Thank you. This is kind of a follow-up. The building permit number 11637 was issued by the board in 2006 to allow for the construction of a non-residential building to be used as a clinic for human use pursuant to special exception 210935. What happened back then is actually Doug came in and went through a number of processes to get that property rezoned so that it could be done into a specific use office building, but he kind of failed to come back and actually do the conditional use for the specific use office building. So basically what's going on is today he's back before you, just requesting nothing more than the specific use office building designation for this building, which will then allow him to put other professional type businesses in there, attorneys, finance planners, insurance agents, et cetera, with standard with all the others. And basically that's all it gets down to.
Okay, Ken, when it comes to specific use office buildings, they're designed in certain zones. He meets that zone.
Yeah, that's correct.
In locations is in regard to collector and arterial streets, and he meets that too.
That's correct.
That was the two things when we put that zone together. It had to do with what zone it could be in and what it had to be adjacent to. You couldn't put it in any zone or any street in that area. And then there was some signage issues. Does he comply with all of those also?
He complies with what we issued him at the time and the current regulations. Now
So he's got a sign there that is illuminated?
he's got an illuminated sign there that is on a pole that's going to be a future discussion, but that's what was.
So in a case like that, when we move it in there, we're bringing in a non-compliant sign, and he'd realize if it's damaged or destroyed, he couldn't replace it as it is.
That's correct. And
Okay.
We'll readdress that at that time.
Okay, thank you. With that, I'll open the public hearing if anyone's here to speak on behalf or against the conditional use.
And it was public notice, and we did not get anybody question or pro or con to the issue, so
So it's general housekeeping.
that's pretty much
And he meets all specifications of the specific use office building zone with the exception of a sign.
correct.
And it's existing. It was there at the time when we approved it originally, and he just didn't come in and get the permit.
Correct.
Is anyone here to speak on behalf or against the use? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing, ask for a motion and a second for further discussion. Motion by Mr. McGuire. Second by Mrs. Johnson. Any other discussion on it? Anyone have any questions with how that specific use zone works? Seeing none, I'll ask for a vote. All in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Third item on the agenda, applicant Tim and Angela Framboys, building permit 16100 is asking for a variance on a side yard setback at 1335 3rd Street Northeast.
Again, yes, this is a application for building permit number 16100. Application was submitted requesting construct a non-conforming 1,216 32 by 38 square foot unattached garage on a 14,650 square foot parcel. Said structure was proposed to be constructed 12 feet from the front north property line where a 25-foot setback is required, and 3 foot from the side west property line where 9-foot setback was required. The original garage that sits there was actually put there back in 1981, and it went through the Board of Adjustment at that time. It was granted to be located basically where it's at. At the time, there was a 13-foot from the north requirement asked for and a 4-foot from the west requirement asked for. But someplace along the line when it got built, it ended up being 3 foot from the west and 12 foot from the north. That's basically it. If application is endorsed, the board may consider fulfilling the sidewalk and boulevard tree requirements as a condition of approval, so. Tim does have a geothermal drain field right here, and that's kind of why he was trying to keep it closer, real close to where it's at right now. He is here for any questions. Again, this was public notice, and no one had contacted me pro or con to this issue.
Thank you. With that, I'll open the public hearing if anyone's here to speak on behalf or against the variance. In this one, his current encroachment's 3 feet on one side, 12 feet on the other, and he's building basically in the opposite direction of those encroachments. He's continuing the encroachment on the front yard, which is actually
He basically just wants to extend
acted
further
as
to
a
the
side
east
yard.
and further to the south. Is what he's requesting.
And he's got a geothermal field which prevents him from building closer to the house. If we asked him to move it closer, 6 feet off the lot line, he couldn't do that because he's got his geothermal wells are there.
That's correct.
Is he gonna use any of the existing structure, or is he gonna tear it completely out?
It's my understanding it'll be completely torn down and new built.
Okay. And he'll use the cement that's under it, I assume? That's why he wants to leave the footprint the same?
Pardon?
The cement that's under that garage will be used in the new garage? Question is why you're gonna use the same footprint? Can we move you back or not?
How far back?
I don't know. As far as 9 feet if we could. That way we wouldn't be here.
The size of my garage that I'm doing,
State your name first, please.
I'm Tim LaFramboise. The size of the garage that I'm doing, from where I'm sitting now, when I go back out my distance, I'm right on the edge of the trench for the well field. So if I go back over it, I'm over.
And that was our primary question. We try to get back off that alley a little further, because of the snow plows and stuff. But normally, we're generally okay with variances if there's reasons that you can't get closer to your house. And in your case, it looks like there's a well field there.
Yeah.
You give up a foot?
What's the size of the garage again that you're putting up?
38 by 32?
Can you slide it back a foot to give, we generally try to at least give the street department 4 feet.
To the east.
To the east? Yeah, I could. I got tracer wire on it. I could go and trace it out and see if I'm sitting on it or not. I know I'm gonna be really close.
Well, I would say we try to go back 4 feet if we can. That just gives the plows and stuff the room. I mean, I'm okay personally if the rest
I
of
got
the,
my fence and landscaping already lined up with that wall. And the fence that I have, I can't tear it apart to change it. That's another issue I have because of the,
it's already there.
well, it's made out of
It goes up
styrofoam.
to the edge of the garage.
Yeah, it's
I
made
see.
out of styrofoam and
I
there's
see.
no way to break it down to
Okay.
change it.
Anybody?
So when
go
you're
ahead.
done, you're gonna have 5 stalls of garage instead of 4 that you have now?
I just have a 2-stall garage now, and
What's on the front side here? What's connected to the house?
that's
Up here.
She's talking about the
that's-
attached
that's
garage.
probably 4 stalls there.
You have 4 stalls on the house now,
Yep,
and you want to add 3 more stalls?
It's too wide and too deep, though.
yeah.
The front
Yeah,
is too
the-
wide.
The front of
and
my
too
house
deep.
is 2 stalls wide, and
You have that many toys?
yeah, I got a bunch of stuff that I have, and I got it stored at my uncle's shop right now, and he's not getting any younger.
Is that storage part of your business? Or,
No, it's just I have a couple old cars that I fixed up, and I've kept them out there, and he's getting older and he's gonna sell it, so I gotta figure out where I'm gonna put it.
So how wide would your garage be if, again, just asking the question, if you adhere to the setback and, but not encumbering the geothermal well? How wide would your garage be?
This way?
With the required 9-foot setback?
Whatever the setback is, 9 feet, is that what it is?
It'd be 6 foot narrow, so it would be 32 by 32.
Well,
Aren't we talking the other way, though? Make it, instead
We're talking
of,
off
instead
the
of
alley.
32 by 38, can you make it 24 by 38? Or 26 by 38 and move it off the alley?
That would make that,
If I
that
go-
side's 38, that side would then be, that side requires a 9-foot setback.
Correct.
The alley requires 9 feet, he's gonna be at 3, so if we took 6 off that, he'd be at 32 by 32. No, the alley's on, you
On
can
the
see the
west
alley
side.
in the picture. He's 38 from the alley to the house. To comply with the 9-foot, he'd be at 32 there. Unless my Common Core math is wrong.
Oh, that's right.
So it's, so it'd be, instead of a 32 by 38, to adhere to the setbacks, it would be a 32 by 32 and still not encumber your geothermal well, is that correct?
Yeah,
I think we're mixing up on the directions here. The 38 is going from the highway.
No, the
South.
38 is this way.
Not,
32 is this way.
not according to this. Oh, yeah, never mind, looking at it wrong. Got it all backwards.
How are we on lot coverage for what we talked about last week? We had that issue with lot coverage and,
He's way under that as far as his lot goes. He's 100 by more than 100.
the way I have this laid out right now is I can get everything I own in the garage the way I have it sitting. I was thinking about turning it sideways like you guys are talking, but there's a power pedestal. You can't see it, it's in the shadow. That's outside my, it's in the shadow right there. And I have my driveway established, and to get turned and into it, if I turned it this way, it'd be,
They're not talking about turning
Yeah.
it around, you know.
But I don't think our concern is that you have room for all your toys. Our concern is more so that you follow the city guidelines. I mean, if we went by how many toys people had, people would fill up their whole yards with sheds. We can't be concerned with what you need to put in it. We can only be concerned with what we think you should construct. Okay?
What's a normal, what's the size of a normal garage?
I just think that the 38 by 32, you know, that's a big garage, plus you already got another 4-stall garage up front. I don't see, I don't understand why you can't move it off the alley to comply with, you know, if a sign gets blown down or somebody tears down a sign, they can't put it back up. He's got a variance for this garage here. If he tears that garage down and builds a new one, the variance for that garage is no longer in effect. Now it's a new construction. Now you should have to comply with whatever the city says at that point. Am I correct or not?
You are correct. In this case, he's asking for, instead of being 25 feet off 14th Avenue, he wants to be 12 feet and 3 feet off the alley. And the question is if, to abide by that 9-foot setback off the alley, you'd have to be 32 by 32.
Seems like a fairly large garage at 32 by 32.
And Pat, if I'm understanding correctly, even that would require a variance to the north.
Correct, correct. Yeah, because there's a 13-foot variance from the north, which that is 14th Avenue, which is a collector route, has a fence. His fence is up against that side, and it's pretty common up there to, that's that double front yard that some people get stuck with, where you know, would have, if it was an active side yard, it would have a 9-foot setback. And because it's on a corner, it's got 25 on each side, so it's a tough one. Any other questions for Mr. LaFramboise? With that, I'll ask for a motion and a second for further discussion. Or I'll hold on, I gotta close the public hearing. Is anyone else here to speak on behalf or against the permit? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing, ask for a motion and a second.
I'll make a motion to approve.
The motion to approve
As is.
variances on both directions, or just the?
Motion to approve as requested.
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Stonebarger, second by Mr. Albertson. Any other discussion? Seeing none, I'll ask for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Roll call, please.
Stonebarger,
Yes.
McGuire,
Yes.
Shriver,
Yes.
Stein,
No.
Johnson,
Yes.
Johnson. No. And Albertson, I don't think we needed, huh?
Well, then maybe I couldn't second the motion.
Albertson, yeah, I'm sorry.
You vote.
Vote.
Yes.
Votes 5-2. It takes 5 votes to approve it. Motion passes. Correct? That's 5. It's 5 at Board of Adjustment.
No, we had 4 yeses, 3 nos.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
5 yeses.
Donna voted yes.
Okay, great.
Good thing I'm here. Any old business, Ken?
Not for me, no.
Or could I get a motion to adjourn? Motion by Mr. Johnson. Second by Mrs. Johnson. Johnson and Johnson. All in favor, say aye. Opposed, motion carries.
Well,
I know, I blew it. Blame me. You mad at me?
Okay, Jeff, you ready? Ready, Jeff? Yep. I'd like to call to order the Watertown City Plan Commission meeting Thursday, May 24th, 2015. Roll call, please.
Stonebarger,
Here.
Arnold is absent, McGuire,
Here.
Shriver,
Here.
Stein.
Here.
Johnson,
Here.
Albertson, council liaison, and Dolly is absent. We have a quorum.
Okay, thank you. Quorum is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
4 for plan commission.
Right, we need four. We got 5 here, we need 4.
Yep.
First item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda, but before we do that, we're going to scratch number 4, the Eastwoods 18th edition preliminary plan. Modify the agenda to remove number 4. Ask for a motion to approve the agenda. Motion by Mrs. Johnson,
Second.
second by Mr. Stonebarger. All in favor, say aye. Opposed, motion carries. Second item is the approval of the minutes from April 23rd, 2015. I need a motion and a second.
So move.
Motion by Mr. Stonebarger, second by Mrs. Johnson. All in favor, say aye. Opposed, motion carries. Third item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from May 6, 2015. Motion and a second.
So move.
Motion by Mr. Stonebarger, second by Mr. McGuire. All in favor, say aye. Motion carries. Fourth item was removed. That was the Eastwoods 18th edition. Fifth item is the Willow Creek Village discussion.
Okay. All right. Thank you. We had a request from Mr. Quinn. He's the director of marketing and project development for Glacial Lakes Capital. And his request was that, currently Willow Creek Village has an approved preliminary plan, and it was approved in May of 2013, so it's still effective and it's still approved. But he is requesting to modify it. Today is just a discussion about that modification, but what he would like to do, this right here is 2nd Street, and it was approved to have a 36-foot wide pavement in the preliminary plan. And what he would like to do is have the preliminary plan modified to have a grass median between the 2 lanes, and within that grass median to erect a sign, kind of says, "Welcome to Willow Creek Village." This is a discussion to just kind of see how the board feels on that. If the board says that might be a possibility, he'll draft up a revised preliminary plan, come back at a later date with more information. But if, on the other side of the coin, if the board feels, we really don't want a sign in our right of way, I just don't think that's a good idea, then he won't go through the time and money of redrafting a preliminary plan. So this is just a discussion, you guys.
So how big a right-of-way would it be? How big a green strip in the center would it be? What?
I was hoping I would have a drawing before this date, but I haven't received one. So I'm not sure exactly how that would be. And that could be, one of you guys' recommendations if he decides to try to move forward with this, that there be, certain width requirements or size requirements, because I right now don't know that information.
Is it in the Gateway Overlay District?
Yes,
What's the signage requirements in the Gateway Overlay District?
I'll defer to.
There's some limited as far as there's no pole signs, they gotta be monument signs. We limit the color of those signs.
They have to be built to similar construction materials that are within the Gateway or Overlay District, which is, earth tones and stone. It can't be made out of metal, essentially, yes.
They can't be on a pole.
It would be a monument style
They
sign
can't be
over there, yep.
illuminated.
The only ones that can be poles are over on the Gateway that touches 212. Everything else has to be a monument style sign. It can be illuminated.
Who's gonna maintain that right away? That's the kind of questions I have. I'm a little hesitant to allow signs in the right of way. That's the city's property. Once we open up that can of worms, everybody's gonna wanna take the signs off their property and put it in the public right of way. I think it's dangerous. Who's, from a liability aspect, council?
Sure, and I agree, and also the idea about maintenance. What if someone were in the wintertime, for example, to lose control and damage the sign, then what happens? Would it go away, or would it be replaced, and at whose expense?
Does he not own the property on both sides of the road?
Yes.
So he could modify his plat. He owns the property on both sides of the road. He could put the sign on either side of the road, and neither of those lots are developed at this time.
Yep. Only lots that are even platted are on the west side of the development over here. So this side hasn't been platted yet.
Tim, would we allow him to put a sign? We would, as long as it met the overlay specifications, he could take 10 feet of his own property, put the sign on his own property too, if he wanted. And I assume he's saying aesthetically it would be kind of neat. You come in, it looks like a gated
Yep.
community, which is fine if the gated community was all on his property.
Yep, he would be allowed to put something there. It would be essentially a real estate style or a development.
So if he wanted to assume the maintenance and development of that road, he could.
Yeah, he can put it on his own private property anywhere he wants to. Just can't put it in the public right away unless we would allow him to.
I understand the aesthetics of what he's trying to do, but I think there's some other things that could get twisted in other parts of town. What do you guys
So
think?
Do we have an issue with the grass boulevard in the center of and 2 lanes? Personally, I think that's, can be.
I would
attractive.
say, how are you gonna do it with the right of way that he has? Is he
Maybe he
gonna,
has to maintain the,
is he gonna make the right of way bigger?
yeah, he would have to.
He'd have
enlarge
to
the right of
increase
way.
that right of way a little bit to still have your
Maybe
your
he would be
roads.
responsible for keeping the center strip mowed and upkeep.
Would there be parking on, you're gonna have traffic going one way each way? Is it just one lane of traffic and no parking, or is?
I would assume there would be no parking, because up in this northern part of the development, it is zoned commercial. It is C3 commercial. We usually don't allow parking on street on commercial.
How far would the Center Boulevard go down?
I don't have that information yet. I haven't seen a drawing. I think, if
Just
it-
in the commercial, then narrow down in the residential, or?
that would probably be his plan. Like I said, though, I haven't seen a drawing from him, so I don't know any of his dimensions or specifications. He'd probably, if there was a recommendation that we made, he'd probably try to follow that, or.
I think we're gonna have to get some more information. We're gonna have to see the sign. We're gonna have to see what he's gonna modify at the right of way. The parking issue is an issue. We do allow parking in C3. You ever been by McDonald's where all that side street, they're parking on all of that stuff. So I think we'd have to get a little more detail as far as exactly what he wants to do. To put a sign in the right of way, we're probably not open to that, but if he's open to a boulevard type of a concept, we might be interested in that.
And that was just a discussion item, so.
Thank you. Sixth item on the agenda is East Park Addition, annexation preliminary plan.
There's, actually, there's four things to vote on with this. There's annexation, a zoning, a preliminary plan, and a plat. So, first, I'll turn on the zoning. This block in the middle that's uncolored is currently outside of the city limits, and the petitioner is requesting that that be annexed into the city and be zoned C3. As you guys remember from last month, this L-shaped piece that's zone ag in the picture, you guys recommended to the council that it be rezoned C3. So, and if that continues through the process and gets approved, this property will be completely surrounded by C3 property. This property is approximately 7.8 acres, so it'd be able to conform to our C3 requirements, and be able to have conforming lots.
So let's do it. Let's do the first two parts before we take the preliminary plan.
Yeah.
I don't think there'll be any issues with getting the annexation done and the zoning. I'll open the public hearing if anyone's here to speak on behalf or against the annexation portion of this resolution 2015-17. If anyone's here to speak, you can step up. Otherwise, we'll close the public hearing and vote. Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Ask for a motion and a second for the annexation of the East Park addition. Motion by Mrs. Johnson,
I'll second it.
second by Mr. Stonebarger. Any further discussion? This is just the annexation portion of it, of bringing it into the city limits. Seeing none, I'll ask for a vote. All in favor, say aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item C is the zoning of the same piece of property. Do I need to continue to open and close public hearings for each resolution? Suppose I do. Be safe.
I think so.
I'll open the public hearing if anyone's here to speak on behalf of the zoning section. Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Ask for a motion and a second for the zoning of this to be zone C3 commercial.
I make a motion that we zone this C3 commercial.
Motion by Mr. Stonebarger, second by Mrs. Johnson. Any further discussion on the zoning section of this? All in favor, say aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item D is the resolution 2015-19, the preliminary plan for East Park Addition.
I have a few comments to make about that. Are you bringing it up?
Yeah,
Okay.
this is the preliminary plan.
Okay, first of all, at the April 23rd Plan Commission meeting, I gave a report of the Technical Review Committee, Design Review Committee, meeting over the concept plan, and we showed you a stick map. And the stick map was the minimum streets to go through the development. And then, I don't know if you noticed, but in the packet, We also put in several different alternatives of streets in there, none of which look like the stick map. That deserves a little explanation. I mentioned at the last meeting that if a signal were to be allowed at 26th Street, that would change everything. And so there's some new information. I had a conversation with the DOT after the last Plan Commission meeting, and they indicated that there could indeed be a signal at 26th and at 23rd. There could be a signal at either one or both of those locations. And so to me, that changes everything. Currently, the developer has hired HDR to do a traffic impact study, and they're working on that right now. I also would like to point out that the various property owners that are in the vicinity would like you to know that they are working together on a plan for this area, and any implication that they're not getting along is just mistaken. They are getting along, and just want to make that clear. Okay, the traffic impact study, I want to talk about that just really briefly. I spoke with the engineer from HDR who's working on the traffic impact study, and I asked him what kinds of information will come out of the traffic impact study. And he said that they will be making a recommendation about where this intersection should be, how far back from Highway 212 it should be to allow safe stacking for traffic in that area, and also how far back this intersection of 26th Street and 8th Avenue should be from the intersection. They aren't done yet, and so they don't have that recommendation yet. And so I don't mean to slow it down, but I will have to say I think it's premature to act on a preliminary plan until we have that information back. If we went ahead and approved the preliminary plan with this location and they came back and said they thought it should be farther back, then what? Same thing here. If they felt this needed a greater stacking distance, then we're kind of stuck if we've already approved the preliminary plan. So my recommendation is to table your consideration of this preliminary plan until at least the traffic impact study report has been completed and submitted to the DOT.
How long do you expect that to be?
He thought it would be submitted to DOT by June 5th, which is just a couple weeks. You don't have to take my recommendation, though, as a plan commission. You have choices. You can approve this preliminary plan as it is, or you can approve it with contingencies. And I did write the resolution with contingencies in case you chose that option. I went down the ordinance, and every place where there was information missing that we hadn't received yet that's required for preliminary plan approval, I put a contingency in, because we are missing information. You could also table it, or you could deny approval. It's up to you how you do that.
Let's take a piece by piece here for a second. The one thing when we see a preliminary plan, we were told not in our lifetime would these guys get together. So we were kind of stuck postage stamping this thing together and taking our best guess of where the roads would be. Last time we were here, we determined in our planning we're not in favor of a road going from Willow Creek Drive to 26th Street without a traffic signal there, because then we're encouraging traffic to move toward an uncontrolled intersection versus controlled. And at that point, it was the traffic signal was going to be on 23rd, and until we knew differently, our recommendation was going to be that Willow Creek Drive comes off that and is diverted toward 23rd.
Right.
At this point, now they're telling us we could have one at 23rd, we could have it at 26th, or we could have it at either one or both. And we'll
Right.
know by June 5th, which I think that's an important part of exactly what this study looks like. And at the same time, they said now all the owners get along, so we should be able to determine where the roads are going to be up in this area. We've made so many mistakes on Highway 212, and you can start at Dakota Bank intersection, and then you can go to the Williams Carpet intersection, and you can go to the 26th Street intersection, and it's just one mistake after another on Highway 212 as to how to best move traffic through there. So that's one issue there. The second issue is we really don't like small little plats like this, and I understand the developers don't know what the size of their lots are going to be, so you really don't want to plat it, but that doesn't change the fact that we don't like postage stamp plats. The third thing is I think the developers are probably interested in getting something going. The other thing we talked about is as soon as that road is actually platted, utilities in the city will start to put services in over there, which we don't have any fire hydrants on that side of the road, which is really going to be interesting when they try to build with no fire hydrants. Now, where are we from the city standpoint, utility standpoint, of getting that utilities into the road? What's the time frame or the procedures? If we approve a plat for the developers today, when will the services be dug in?
Well,
Or if we approve a preliminary
preliminary
plan and
plan.
they go to
Right.
they go through with platting.
right, the preliminary plan wouldn't trigger any improvements. Those are triggered by a plat.
What's the stages from when we approve the preliminary plan through the platting procedures?
Okay, if you approve a preliminary plan, if you approve the one, which one is it? If you were to approve this preliminary plan, all of these lots could be administratively approved. This could be approved as one big lot here if a big box came in, and that would essentially completely cut off this property from any access to this street and this intersection, because we're not showing any roads anywhere touching this property. That's my concern. I know they say they get along, and I believe they get along, but if either of them sold, who knows if the new ones would have any interest in providing access. I don't know that. This is the time when you do that. So we need to have connections to the adjacent property. That's required by ordinance. We're leaving this other development high and dry by not
Depending
showing
on how that
roads.
lot comes in, they could be required to access only off Willow Creek Drive,
Right.
not off 26th
Right.
Street or 23rd Street.
Right.
That's the danger where you try to protect someone else. Have I opened public hearing yet? I don't think I have. Have I? Public hearing's open. So our options are is we can look at it and see the plat. I'd like to hear from the landowners of why they're coming before us with a preliminary plan before they know if there's going to be a stoplight on 26th Street, and what we can do to help them out if there's a sense of urgency. Can we have to have you come up and speak into the microphone. It's recorded and you're on TV.
Okay, where do we start? As far as the streets, 26 coming in, we're finding ourselves in kind of a catch-22. We can't get approval for the street until we get the DOT to go along with us. They told us we have to do a traffic impact study, which apparently no one else in the area had to do. So we went ahead and.
And that was between you and the DOT. The DOT told you had to do that study, correct?
Yes, they did.
Interesting. And they just, and then, so how long does that take and what does that entail?
Well, we had the same information that Sarah just gave you. They're telling us in a couple weeks they'll have that complete. But I guess, a couple things from our standpoint was, just to the west of 26, the Sherwin-Williams lot, now we were under the impression that had been approved as a preliminary plan for that lot, but how could they get approval when the access was still up in question?
I'd like to add, that had a lot of contingencies, and I think the traffic impact study was one of them.
No one else was required to get a traffic impact study. The DOT told us that themselves. So,
Well, the traffic impact study was for a street at 26, regardless of
Well,
who put it in.
okay, but we do have the access there already. We could have had access there. What we had to do was go to the DOT because with that access and the street, the entrance had to be upgraded is what they were telling us. So if we had to upgrade it, you know, I guess my question is, didn't the other lot didn't they have the same issues?
They probably did, but the reason they're requiring it now and they didn't back in 98 or whenever they initially applied for it at 23rd,
I'm
this
addressing
is
26.
the current access is for a driveway, and the request is to change it from a driveway to a public street. And to the DOT, that's a critical change. If you wanted to leave it as a driveway, I don't think they would have required a traffic impact study, but that's between them and you. And if you're talking about the other one, 23rd Street, was a permit that had been issued, I don't know, it got approved many years ago and then renewed, and I don't know the history on that, but I don't think they were required to do a traffic impact study.
So the preliminary plan on Don's western area, that was approved?
We did not have a preliminary plan on that, but you're talking about the street access, and that's a DOT issue. And I can't speak for the DOT, but I think that there was no traffic impact study required. I think there was a traffic impact study required for Walmart when those roads went in. But for whatever reason, it wasn't required at 23rd.
Okay. Well, what we're trying to do is to get the 26th Street, you know, entrance and the street also approved. And then the east-west street, which would be 8th Street, you know, at one time, 3 years ago or whatever, we had that preliminary plan approved. And we were under the impression that, that we would be able to just get it reapproved, but, that kind of went by the wayside apparently, so we're starting at square one. The issue with 26 going north, we've always had consensus with the Morris family that they had no problem with 26th Street going through their property and joining up with First Avenue on the north. From our standpoint, when you put 26th Street in and going north, you know, traffic will dictate whether there's a traffic light needed, but without a street, it's irrelevant. And without, you know, so we're kind of in a catch-22.
It's kind of chicken and the
situation.
egg on this, and I agree that Morris more than likely do want a street to go through there.
Yeah, that's the only
But we don't
access.
have, it's not on the, we've never seen it on a plan. That's where the problem arises. If we saw it on a preliminary plan that had that street through there, and then our only question would be, is there gonna be a stoplight at 26th as to what that street looks like up there? Our goal is to make this, to get this done right here. Why, are you comfortable with where you have the road right there? That's where the roads are gonna be no matter what. The questions is where are the intersections off 29th, and where's the intersection gonna be off 26th with 8th?
The intersection off of 29th or Willow Creek Drive is basically where we've got it drawn there, because that was as close, and that's been predetermined.
Is what the DOT would
Yeah,
allow.
that was
And
predetermined
you're
years
okay
ago.
whether, if the DOT comes back and says it's gotta be 100 feet one direction or the other, you don't, that's not an issue with you,
Well,
I
it
assume.
would be an issue, because that is the position when First Avenue was built, that's where they said we could have an access.
The DOT.
No, the DOT.
And if they change their mind, we
If-
can't do
well,
anything
if
about
they
that.
Well, I would think that maybe the city could do something about that by putting
This
some
board
pressure-
can't. This board can't.
Pressure on the DOT, because if we go back another 100 feet, it just makes it, the lots
Sure.
less usable.
Sure it does.
It makes big problems for us, and we're trying to,
How long till you hear from the DOT on where that intersection's at?
well, that's basically gonna be a part of the.
This traffic study?
impact Study, I would assume.
Why now? Why not till after the traffic impact study to bring this before us?
Well, because, you know, time is of the essence right now. After many, many years, as everyone knows, we finally do have some interest in lots. And we'd hate to lose, you know, potential buyers and potential businesses that go in there. It's always been our, you know, situation where we'd like to see this developed as much as the city would in the best possible way. But when we look at our development, just to have, 2 or 3 accesses in it, we don't think we're asking for too much. And as far as the 26 going north, there again, we've always had, we do have maps drawn, and I know that some maps have circulated in the city and with the city engineers and the mayor and everybody down the line, showing 26 going north. We put a bend in it, basically, to slow traffic down if that's an issue. But if it develops where traffic, you get that much traffic through there, then I would think that the city would want that street in, and the DOT would maybe be more lenient about not giving us a problem on the access. So, at this point in time, I mean, this plan has been in place, this particular one you're looking at, for 3 or 4 years.
But never platted.
Never platted.
So it wasn't in place. The preliminary
Well,
plan was
okay.
approved but never platted.
Yep.
That's your mistake.
Okay, but the
That's your
preliminary
mistake. If
plan
you would have
was-
platted that 3 years ago, we wouldn't be here
Correct.
today.
We missed the deadline
Correct.
because of the economy, we had.
So let's move on from that.
Okay. What,
What we look at as, on this, we have the option of approving it, tabling it, or denying it, approving it with contingencies. I don't think any of us have any issues. We've gone through this many times as to where that intersection is. The DOT is going to determine that with you as to where the 29th Street intersection is. Where the 26th Street intersection is, I don't think any of us have any issues with where that goes. I don't care if it's 100 feet further north or 20 feet further south. That's going to be determined by you guys and the DOT. So we don't really have any skin in that game. I think the skin that we have in the game is how the roads are going to move through there, and we can't really determine what that's going to be until we find out whether or not there's going to be a street light there, because that will make a difference as to whether it's going to be a straight shot or a bend, and I don't think you guys have a problem with that either. I think John's going to have a question on the street width at
Yes.
26th Street. The busier that street is, it's got a 60-foot right-of-way. Why 60 feet?
is that right?
Rod DeYoung with Austin. In the last plan, that's what we had was 60 feet right of way. in there.
What do you have for lanes in
That'd be,
what do you envision in lanes there? And is that going to be wide enough? If a street light goes there and that becomes a real collector from, is that going to be big enough?
Excuse me. Yeah, with the 33 feet in there, that'd provide 3 11-foot lanes in that area. There'd be no parking in that area is what it was.
So you'd envision a right turn lane,
A center turn lane
center turn lane.
where you could do left and right turns. But basically, when you get down to 212, it would be a solely left turn lane in that area.
Are we limited by the culvert that's under there for the road width side?
We're gonna have to extend the culvert to the east there, approximately 20 feet at this point.
Why wouldn't you have a right turn lane and a left turn lane? And if you did that, you would have to have a bigger right-of-way.
That's
I
gonna be
realize.
determined by the traffic impact study when it comes out. If we need a right turn lane, then we'll have to evaluate that at that intersection.
I mean, I think you'd probably want as big of an intersection there as you can. That brings traffic in and flows through there. I would think that would be, I know, I knew the first thing we'd see is a 60-foot right-of-way, and is that going to be big enough to service that intersection? But again, we hinge back to that traffic study. I foresee that being an extremely busy intersection. I think that's going to be
I
the
would
feeder
rather-
that goes up into that whole
I
area.
would rather see a minimum of 66-foot right-of-way, because by the time you get a 4-foot sidewalk and ADA wants 5-foot sidewalks, you got 6-foot green space to plant trees, that's 22 feet already, and if you were to put in a 40-foot wide street, you wouldn't have it in a 60-foot right-of-way. I think it's almost critical that from now on, we request 66-foot wide right-of-ways, so then the city has the option of deciding what size street that would go in there.
Down to that intersection there, it's gonna be wider than 40 feet anyway, because we gotta provide turn lanes for truck movements in the state right-of-way. So, and it's gonna hinge on what they bring in there. for a right turn lane on 212. So
So you think it'll be wider as it approaches 212 and narrow
and
down
you can
as
see
it
that
crosses your
by the red-
property?
You can see by the red lines in there already, that's basically the minimum width for a truck to make the turn movement for a right turn off of 212, as well as a right turn from 26 to the west there. So those are the kind of the minimum radius to make it around the corner. And also you'll have like a 4-foot shoulder, and then you have your sidewalk beyond that. So in that area, it's gonna be wider than 40 feet.
How wide is that right of way? Can you tell us that, Jeff? How wide's the Highway 212 right of way there? And that's what you're getting at, Rod, is that as we get across the Highway 212 right of way, the road can widen at that
It will be
point.
wider, you know.
And then it necks down to 3 lanes as it crosses your right of
When you
way.
get onto the property itself, it'll be down to 60 feet.
Don't see the tool I need right now.
Because I think that was John's biggest concern is when you get to the intersection of Highway 212 is, are we going to be too congested there, too small?
According to GIS, the right-of-way is approximately, 215, 220 feet, but that's on GIS. There could be some errors there, but that's
Now,
GIS
that's,
shows.
Is that from the center of the road?
that's to the west of the intersection. I believe, if I remember right, that's probably about 150 feet in there.
Yeah, on GIS,
Center of
that
the
shows
road?
150 from the center of
That'd
the
be
road
correct.
to the edge of the right-of-way where that culvert is.
So where it comes off the Coho property, we've got about 150 feet to probably 100 feet to the back of the curb there, the highway of 212,
There's no curb and gutter in 212. It's all like a rural
from
section.
where the road would be. Sarah, is that fairly common as we approach that Highway 212 intersection that we may add a lane or two and then neck down to 3 lanes coming into theirs? A turn lane?
You mean on the street part?
Yeah, on the street part, it'd
The
be,
city part?
they'd have a center lane, they'd have 3 lanes. It would probably end up, how far back into this Coho property do you envision 3 lanes
They're proposing 3 lanes the whole way.
for as far as we go in there? And then as we approach Highway 212, it may widen beyond
Might
that.
go to 5,
Okay.
you know. 4, probably.
So from the development standpoint on this, if one of the options is to table it until we see that traffic impact study and make a decision, how does that impact you today versus if we approved it with contingencies in regards to those?
Well, we do have some sales, a couple sales that are pending and some interest, but nobody can do anything until, some of this is put in place, that we can start to, show where the streets are going to be and that type of thing, so, which is pretty understandable from a buyer's standpoint. But we'd sure like to see some, we'd sure like to have the opportunity to go ahead and get something started. As far as, buyers and sales, we do have the interest, so.
And the real issue is where the street is you guys are pretty firm on where that's going to be. It's where those 2 intersections are, and that has to do with the DOT and their study. 3 intersections, really. One at 212, one at 26th and 8th, and one at, the DOT has a say also, you said, where 26th and 8th is? Where that road's going to intersect, where 8th intersects 26th?
Well, I don't know, that they do, unless Sarah knows something
I'm
other.
not sure what all their authority is, but they will make a recommendation in the traffic impact study to whoever reads it as to what that stacking distance should be.
How far back that first intersection is off Highway 212?
But if it is just a recommendation, I guess I would sure hope that we'd have some input, as well as the city, as well as yourselves. The DOT shouldn't be able to dictate everything within this development, how they want to see it.
If it touches that highway, we don't have a whole lot of say with the DOT.
Well, where it touches it, but I mean, as far as the cross street on 8th and that type of thing, it seems kind of strange to us that they would be able to dictate.
So John, you've been told though that you can leave 8th the way it is? That's,
Well, see, we haven't, been told anything by the DOT yet. We haven't had any feedback. We're hoping that you folks in the city will have some input on that, and if that's where everyone feels that 8th Street should be, it's good for us where we show it. It should be good for everybody.
yeah,
We're back far enough on Willow Creek Drive, is from what they had originally stated as far as the entrance. I think we're about 400 feet deep.
Right.
And so the backup should be, stacking should be plenty.
I would think.
We look at other accesses around the area, and we just are amazed that we're having to jump through these hoops where a lot of other people haven't had to do that.
Different time, different place is how
Well,
that works.
It is somewhat, but on the south side of 212 in the same area, there's 9 accesses, counting 29th and 23rd. And we're trying to get one.
Those are
Bill.
driveways, though.
Okay, we're calling them driveways, but eventually there will be access through those driveways. And if they put lots in the backside of that, you can always have egress and right away to get traffic through there, but,
And when it comes to the DOT, we don't win those fights with them very often. It's their highway. They call all the shots. We could go west on 212, and I can give you a myriad of people who have tried to put accesses on the DOT for businesses and got denied out that way. Any other questions that you guys have in regard to the preliminary plan? Then we have to decide whether we want to table or approve the preliminary plan with contingencies or deny altogether.
I don't have a question, John, but I just think you should know that we really don't care where they are. It's just that if the DOT comes in and says something different than what this group and the city council says, go ahead, and the DOT comes in, then everybody looks, I'd be okay approving it, with the city even, but with contingencies, so when they come in.
But talking to HDR, which, an engineering company that does a lot of this stuff, they even give us the impression, well, if we have a street there at 26th, and that's where it's gonna be, then the DOT has to try to also accommodate that and work around that.
But right now,
With
it's not a city street. It's a driveway.
Correct, but, looks, you see.
If it was a street, it would be easy.
You see what I'm saying, though?
To make a driveway a street is trickier.
If you got a street, then the access can be, adapted to the street. But if you don't have either one, then you're,
It'll be interesting to see how their study comes, and I hope you get a stoplight there. I think that's a reasonable spot for a stoplight, and I think everybody agrees that.
I think that's where it should be. The south going into is the second entrance into Walmart, and it's just a natural, to us, it looks like a natural that's where a stoplight should be. And if you look at the stoplight that's recommended for 23rd, I don't know how that's gonna work because it's too close to the bridge. Talking about stacking traffic, there's no way to stack traffic with a light at 23rd.
At our last meeting, we all agreed on that the correct spot was probably 26, not 23rd, especially the way the development's moving. Any other questions? Anyone else to speak on behalf or against the preliminary plan? With that, I'll close the public hearing, ask for a motion and a second for further discussion.
I would make a motion to table the preliminary plan until after the traffic flow study has been completed.
I have a motion by Mr. Stonebarger to table. Second by Mrs. Johnson. Further discussion? When we table, Stan, how fast can we bring it back off the table? At the next meeting. Once
Yeah.
it's tabled,
Yep.
we can bring it every 2 weeks.
Yep.
Today is May 21st. June 5th is when they're telling us this is going to be done. When's our first meeting after June 5th?
I believe that's June 19th.
So assuming they get us that traffic study, if they get the traffic study, we can go June 19th.
Or you could call a special meeting right after the impact study's done.
But if they did that, Stanton, they would need to know, especially if the DOT does make a move that, they're gonna have to have Mr. DeYoung, move that street. He's gonna have time of, you'll have to replat it, basically, if they do say that it has to be further north. So they may need that time anyway. I mean, it would kind of be up to them, if they have their stuff ready to go, to do the special meeting, which would be fine.
What I don't want to do is put it off, not be able to pull it off the table. I look and say, if these guys don't show up with a traffic study on the 5th of June, we want to be able to pull it right off the table and move forward. As far as any buyers go, I don't think there's any issues that the way this is laid out is correct. Our only real consideration is how's 26th Street going to look as it moves north of there? And that will be guided by the impact study. But as we see the plat in front of us, unless there's an issue with the right-of-way as it crosses their property, I don't see any problem with the lot sizes, the lot widths. From the city standpoint, I don't know if I got the question answered. How long is it going to take? Two things I'm going to ask. One, how long is it going to take before the sewer and water's in the middle of that road? And secondly, how long till that road's paved?
We would expect if the preliminary plan's approved, they'll start bringing plats. And depending on the phasing, and we didn't get any proposed phasing in the preliminary plan, that's part of it. And they're saying it would be all one phase, but then they've got a plat too that isn't the whole thing that they're proposing. So there's information that we don't have to make those decisions. But I would presume it would be coming from the east to the west, because that's the first plat that they've presented.
Mark Meyer, Watertown Utilities. As far as the water main, we won't install it until the plat's recorded and the road is cut to subgrade. We have a contractor hired every summer, so it'd be just a matter of, as long as it happened this summer before winter, But once the plat's recorded, road's cut to subgrade, we'll install it.
Roads cut by the developer?
Mm-hmm.
So soon as it's, they record the plat, cut the road, you guys drop the water in, sewer goes in by the developer?
Yep.
All in one? Will that be paved by the end of the year?
No, probably not. They'll be given a certain amount of time that they have to make the improvements. That's covered in the letter of assurance or the development agreement. Our ordinance says 3 years, but the council can make that any term they choose.
Make him pave it
Like
quicker. I assume the
23rd
developer
over to
would.
the west doesn't have a deadline.
Could the developer pave it this year if they wanted to?
No, we don't like it to be paved the year that the underground's put in. We like to let it go a year to settle.
Even on a commercial exposure when it's
Absolutely.
when it's their only access in and out of those lots?
Yeah, to not do that is to risk early failure on our road.
Yeah, we wouldn't have an issue with that. I mean, that's just kind of the standard procedure, and it's probably the best way to build a street is to rough it in 1 year and let it set, and then blacktop it the second.
And actually, building could go on during the same period whether it was gravel. I mean, it would basically kind of come together at the same time if they got that far along. A permit could be issued by the time the building's done, the street would probably be in anyway, so.
Any other discussion? Well, with that, I'll ask for a vote. All in favor, say aye. Opposed? Motion carries. We'll table it until June 5th. Jeff, can you keep an eye on that and keep us posted via email as to where we are with that? If that DOT study is delayed in any way, I'd like to bring it back off the table and proceed with it.
Okay, I can keep you guys up to date.
Seventh item on the agenda is lot coverage ordinance revision.
Um,
On this one, Jeff, I've talked to a few guys. We'd like to get the 101 on it and not actually take it to a vote tonight.
You still got 6E.
Are we tabling both
Okay, I'm
items?
sorry. Yeah, I think we may as well table the plat. What I'll need is a motion and a second on 6E, Resolution 2015, to table the plat also. Sound right?
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Stonebarger, second by Mrs. Johnson. All in favor, say aye. Opposed, motion carries. Item number 7, lot coverage ordinance revision. And I think I've talked to John, I've talked to Jason, I talked to Dennis Arnold. I think what we want to do is kind of get a 101 on the recommendations for this, and then table it also, and then we'll bring it up to discussion after we've had a little time to digest it.
Okay. Yeah, I'll just give a quick background. At the May 6th Board of Adjustment meeting, there was a variance request that was in front of you, and it was about a setback variance, requesting that the setback be reduced from 6 feet down to 4.3 feet. And at that meeting, the board, you guys struggled with this variance because, for 2 reasons. One, how much impervious area this lot would have after that addition was built. And 2, the size of the wall of the structure being so close to the property line. So then at the Plan Commission meeting, you guys recommended that staff draft an ordinance, and the ordinance that was drafted incorporated both of those issues into it. First, there was a maximum lot coverage, and we currently have a maximum lot coverage for the R3 zone, and that's this bullet G that says the maximum allowable amount of lot coverage shall be 80%, and that's the R3. So then we drafted in for the R2 and R2A, the maximum allowed amount of lot coverage shall be 65%. And then for the R1, the maximum allowed would be 50%. So that's to go, with the maximum lot coverage. And then we also drafted in this setback requirement, and I didn't have a chance to ask Stanton to review it, so my wordage might not be very good or correct, but it's the required setback shall be proportionate to the height of a building. For every 3 feet of building height, there shall be 1 foot of required setback. This provision shall not allow the setback to be less than the minimum required by any of the previous provisions.
When you say building height, is it sidewall height or is it peak of the roof?
That's something that needs to be discussed. Currently, in our chart, we go by total height, but I mean, we could change some wordage to make it sidewall height, or to better clarify that.
What's easiest for you, Ken, to determine that sidewall? So, how many times you get a crazy high peak roof nowadays? Probably not too many. So a sidewall would be easier for you to shoot a tape up and down it. So when you came up with these, did we, specifically the percentages?
Yep.
Did we draw that off somewhere else?
Well, yeah, me and Tim actually looked at a lot of properties, and it really varies depending on where you're looking at town and how big the lots are. Especially in the R1 zone, we have some newer lots in parts of town that are, 13,000 square feet. So 50% is, a big number, but it doesn't cover as much as some of the lots that are in the older existing part that may be, 7,000 square feet, or, that example that you guys had at the lake where it was only 32 feet wide, or however wide that was.
So we have a provision, if it's less than 75 feet or whatever, you take a percentage to find out your side yard, so it can be less than 9 feet.
Yes.
Now, what would you do for this height requirement for narrow lots?
The way it's drafted, the intent was that we never go below that minimum of 6 feet, but if someone wanted a 21 foot tall sidewall, if they had a 2-story building, then it would be increased to 7 feet, because 21 feet.
Oh, yeah, but theoretically, if you had a flat roof structure, you go up 35 feet, that'd be over 11 foot of side yard, where
Yeah.
right now we're only requiring 9 yard.
Yep,
9 feet.
you'd have to increase that required setback to 11 in that case. And if that, I think it's a discussion today, if that's something you guys don't want to see or want to change.
Personally, I wouldn't like to see that. I mean, we used to require like 6 foot side yards, and
And
now
I-
we're requiring 9 foot side yards. This would require potentially 11 and a half foot side yards.
And I put them both in because they were both discussed at that meeting.
Say that again, John. I mean, when I looked at it, I said, well, if it's 3 to 1 on,
If you have a flat roof,
Yeah.
flat roof structure that's 35 feet tall, you would be about 11 and a half foot setback.
right, if you, a 35-foot sidewall, but they
And
can't,
right now, we have a
32
9
peak
foot-
to the peak is our ordinance, correct?
Yeah, but if, like, they said side yard, or sidewall, but potentially it could be a 35-foot sidewall.
Okay,
No.
yeah, I looked in and said you've got a 12-foot sidewall, you gotta be 4 feet.
So in that particular case, the
Then they would go
minimum-
back to the 9.
the 9 or 6.
And
if it
what,
was,
and what you're saying is you go 35, you're only gaining 2 feet of sidewall, and you think it should be more setback than
No,
that.
what I'm saying is you could require an 11 and a half foot side yard. Okay,
On a
now,
35-foot wall.
15 years ago, we had 6-foot side yard. That was adequate. And now it's 9-foot side yard was adequate. Now we're talking potentially 11 and a half foot side yard, adequate. We already have people that say, you know, you're telling me what I can and can't do with my yards, what I can put in my side yard and what I can't put in my side yard, and are we compounding the problem?
You know, I think your side yard's based on a reasonable and customary size house. I think what we're trying to do is somebody builds a really tall building, we don't want them quite so close when they build something that's not customary.
So
I
so
think.
if we have a small lot, 75, or say we have those 60-foot lots or those 50-foot lots, how are you going to adjust that for the 1 and 3 side wall?
Say on a 50-foot, let's say you put a 2-story house on a 50-foot, and that's kind of part of the discussion part of it. I'd like to, don't you have some software we can kind of show some visual examples? Don't you have that stuff, Luke?
There's some of it that we are learning how to work with a little bit at a time.
Because you look
Get a
like John's
visual.
saying, what if you had a 50-foot with 2-story, Ken, how big is a sidewall on a general 2-story house? So let's say it's 18 feet, that's 6, 2-story. So that would require a 6-foot side yard setback then, on each side, which is kind of where we are now on a 50-footer.
And we just got done with the 36-foot wide lots at the lake last meeting, so that.
Right, so 50 is about 50 with a standard 2-story. We really didn't change anything. So if we make it smaller to a 35-foot, same one on a 35-foot, now you got 6 and 6, 12 off of 25. You're down to a 23-foot width building would be. And that's what you're getting at. We're limiting how wide that building can be the smaller we go on those smaller lots.
6 foot really is a pretty good number that we're working with. And just FYI, I got about 3 more of these little 40-foot, 35-foot lots at the lake all wanting to put 2-story buildings on. Currently, you know, they're not asking for variances, but the neighbors are already calling and chewing my butt on them. I'm saying, I'm sorry, they're legal. That's about all I could do.
And they're at a 6-foot setback
They're at the
on a
6-foot
2-story
setback.
building. And that's right in line with our code, and it's pretty close to what we were talking about changing. And the point would be is if we squeeze them any further, somebody's not happy, one of the two. Interesting. I think, what else do we need to look through on this? Because I think we want to
I have
digest it.
another-
Luke, what do you have to say on it?
I've got
Go ahead,
another
John.
question. Now, we have 80% for R3,
Yes.
and if 65% for R2 and 50% for R1? Now, where did those percentages come from, I guess?
We looked at a lot of properties, and it was kind of a little bit pulled out of the air with, you know, we already had the 1 in place, we already had the 80% in place, and then we looked at a lot of properties, you know, with the GIS overhead, and just kind of saw how many properties meet that and don't meet that, and it was, you know.
What did you find, let's go back one thing, 50%, is that the footprint of the house, or does that to include cement?
We do have a definition for lot coverage, and it does include cement.
Okay, so just so we know what we're talking about, what did you find, and that's something maybe at our next meeting, if there's time, we should take a look at some of those examples. What did you find when you looked from above? The biggest distinguishment that we need is between the old part of town and the new part of town. My hunch is on a 150-foot corner lot, doesn't matter, but what about the 40-footer down in the southwest part of town?
Sorry, I was,
So-
I can.
Go ahead.
or Jeff and I looked at this one day, and like the new, you say your new developments, your R1 developments is our typical new things. Most of those were 40%. I mean, with the setbacks you got, that almost gets you to 50% anyway, not counting the concrete. But anyway, I counted a couple areas. We counted a couple areas, like one just up here on Broadway where they're packed pretty tight together, and counting all of what's there presently, they were somewhere in that kind of 65. Some were closer to 70. Most of them were, between that.
So the old part of
55 to
town
65.
currently is at about a 70%
In
lot
that
coverage
range,
right now.
65 to 70, yep.
So if we bring in something that says 50, they're all non-compliant.
Yeah,
That was in the R2A
that was
area.
one of the R2A.
The R1 areas, which are your typical 75-foot lots, those are well below the.
The R2A, what are we saying on R2A, 65?
Yeah.
In this proposal, yes.
My issue, I guess, is I don't want to pass an ordinance that right away we make a whole bunch of homes non-compliant.
And that's what we want to do. We want to kind of take a look at it and feel it out a little bit. It'd be nice to see some examples from above, because we surely don't want, every time they want to do something, have to come in for a variance. We get enough of that. Any other questions with him on it?
Main
Luke?
point that I'd make with that, and I'd point out that really the best way to go about it is to do what Jeff and Tim have done, and go and take a look at and just start hunting and pecking to see what your averages are as you go through it. One of the things you're going to find as we go through, you guys are all well aware of the fact that we have one R1 district, but honestly probably about 4 different flavors of the R1 district when we take in the new development since, say, 1990. The portions of town that are straight north of here that are considered R1, and then the lake area, and you're going to have different lot coverages as you go into those. The point is that this may be a tool that's used as we explore adding or changing some sorts of residential districts in the future too.
To try to protect the older part of town that was zoned and platted years before our current ordinances, how much of that older part of town is R2A versus R1?
I can pull up a map for you.
Because, I mean, we can say, oh, in R2A, we're fine, that's different. But then we really find we've got some R2A flavor in one of those R1 zones. And those are the people we don't want to handcuff anybody, but we want to try to wordsmith an ordinance that protects all landowners and also lets people do what's considered reasonable with their property.
Yeah, this map's a little hard to see, in detail, because we're looking at, the whole town besides the lake, but this C3 is Highway 212, and then you got a lot of R2A, and then you got the downtown area, you got a little bit more of R2A, and then it transitions into R1.
And I'll quick show as I go up here. You're all well aware of this area.
That's the hospital area.
This does not equal this as you go through. You look at that, in all reality, when you look at these, you're gonna be pushing
Holy Name Church, that area.
60% lot coverage in these. In these, you're gonna be comfortable. You'll be comfortable in the areas out east and the newer ones. You go toward the lake, and you're probably closer to your R2A district at that point, at least on some of the older ones. So again, the point is that that's going to be an issue, regardless as to how you look at it, unless we change the zoning or else we go by an actual lot area. And I really don't know that I'd advise that either, based on the idea that that's kind of the point of a lot coverage. So again, it's probably better to go to a district by district thing. I'm not saying the way that it's done is wrong, because I think that this is a really good start.
I'd like, from a board standpoint, if you see any properties, could we write the addresses down, get them to Jeff, so we could get some ideas? If you see one that you think, boy, this seems like it's got way too much structure for a house, so we could get some visual examples of where they're at. Because that percentage, I understand exactly what you did. You said, hey, we had to put a number down. We
Yeah.
put a number down.
And like Luke said, it really made it difficult when there's so many parts of town that are labeled the same zone.
And I think I'll do it. I'm around different parts of town. I think you just look at one and go, and we have to remember the lot coverage is to include cement. So if we see any that have extraordinary amounts of cement, we should write that address down, take a look at it from above and say, this would comply with the new ordinance or this shouldn't. We should be able to look at them and say, that property is the ones we try to not to build more just like that. You know, we discourage.
And it does or does not include the boulevard. Some are 66 foot, some are 80, some are 100.
Some are
so
big.
Some of these little lots, that's the only grass they got.
Some of the perception of the green area is not their property. Okay. Any other questions for Jeff on that? I'll need a motion and a second to table that.
I'll make a motion.
Motion by Mr. McGuire. Second by Mr.
Second.
Stonebarger. All in favor, say aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Eighth item is signage in the specific use office.
Okay. I'm gonna let
Zone.
Tim take that. I'll get this document open for him. I'll run the camera, but I do have new business when it gets to that.
Okay.
Or old business. I mean.
Okay. Okay, if you guys remember here at the last meeting we had with Plan Commission Board of Adjustment, we talked a little bit about that North Highway 81 area where the right-of-way is being acquired by the state, and how we're gonna deal with signage up in there, because there's a lot of areas up there. There's an area up there that's specific use office building. So what Jeff and I had done here in the meantime, since that last meeting, was we did, I had one of the sign guys here in town went and did a survey of all those signs that are up in that area, just to give us a rough idea what's up there. I do have that right kind of here. And there are two of these signs that will be coming to you guys at our next meeting for Sign Code Board of Appeals. This here is one of them. This is a 7x8 top structure. It's not a great picture, but this part of the structure right here is 7 foot, it's 56 square feet, but you also have, this is a pole sign with a pole cover on it. The top of this sign, I believe, is 15, 16 feet, something like that, to the very top of that sign. The way our present ordinance reads is a non-illuminated sign affixed to the building is preferred type in a specific use office building, and a non-illuminated ground or monument sign may also be considered. So no direction on size, anything like that. So what we were directed to do in the meantime was to look at what's up there now, kind of establish some sort of a ground rule for size based off what's there. So we kind of put in this 50 square foot number, because as we go through this White and Comus one's, the sign part of it right here, this is 3x6, but if you count the whole structure to total height, you're somewhere in about a 6x6 total height from the ground up. This is another one that will be coming in front of you guys, these two.
Because it's illuminated?
Because there's no language to allow me to put it there. There's nothing, I can't permit it, because the only thing it says is what may be considered that comes in front of you guys as the Board of Adjustment for an approval for a specific use office building. And in a resident, this is an R1s, these are R1 zones up there. And the only thing that's allowed to be in there is a specific use office building in an R1 zone. Some of the other ones, like here's another one. This one isn't coming to you guys now because it's a different person.
Take one step back. In the specific use office, we allow one ground monument sign.
It may be considered.
May be considered, so it's not actually coded in. Every single one comes before us.
The way I would interpret in talking with Ken and staff upstairs is that is approved by you guys as the Board of Adjustment as part of their specific use office building designation.
Do you remember, not very often you get to look at an ordinance and you get to say, geez, I wonder what these guys were thinking. Well,
Yeah.
some of
Saying
us
that a
were
lot
there.
lately.
But this is a chance we get to go back. And the one thing we have to the one thing in this area specifically that we have to remember is we made as a Board of Adjustment, whether we were on it at that time or not, is we made promises to these people up there. And all the current occupants of these businesses were there and part of those promises. So now we go back and say, now we have to reconsider and think, what were we making promises for and what was our mindset when we made them? When it comes to signage, it leads me to believe that we were very, very careful. And I'll talk to Bueller and Danforth and some of those guys. Arnold was there when we did this. If I were to read the ordinance and not know, I'd say there was a reason they said, we're not gonna put numbers in there for signs. We wanna look at them case by case because it was a very precarious and a careful situation. And from our standpoint, we look and say, well, now the roads are moving. You know, we've said before, are we gonna put a road in when we permit a building? If not, then when? We also say when we sunset things in an ordinance, if we don't sunset it now, when? If we just let them move it, I thought we were gonna sunset these. Is this the time the sun sets on them? And they go out and put new signs in that meet the ordinance, of which the ordinance sounds like it's case by case.
Yes, and I think kind of what,
Because you have to remember, it's in an R1 zone.
right,
And they built in R1 zones. Did they have building permits?
yep.
They got building permits that were issued contrary to the ordinances we had in place.
Well, actually, the Snyder Ag Clinic, it was done as a professional building at the time. We reread that today, but there was no mention of the sign within that Board of Adjustment meeting.
Was it in the building permit?
No.
So they put a sign up without a permit.
Well,
Well, at the time, the signed ordinance
Chicken
probably
or the
was not
egg?
in place.
Chicken or the egg? You know, you look and go, well, would you expect
we
them to
did
build a
not
building without a
Go back and see
sign?
if there was a sign permit for that sign, but that was back in '81, so,
You know, was it on the drawing? Was it on the pictures? But that's kind of one of those where you go back and go, what were they thinking?
there wasn't a whole lot of signage requirement back in
Yeah,
'81.
Sure.
I think back.
It was like
back
$2
then-
or 50
right,
cents for a
exactly.
sign permit.
Yeah, exactly. The sign ordinances back then, for better or for worse, depending on your perspective, were, shall we say, a lot more lenient. Or relaxed, maybe a better way to put it, than they are now. I guess from what you've said, Pat, and during this meeting and also previously, I get the impression, again, I don't remember back then, but I mean, it was somewhat contentious as far as the signs that were put up after,
You know, as I remember, it wasn't the signs. You know, I think,
Use, I think, was the bigger.
yeah, it was more
issue.
use. And I think, you know, that's why I said we have to go back and think through it and talk to some people. I don't think anyone up there really had an issue with the signs that were in place at the time that they saw. I think what they were, and I'll talk to a couple of them, but I think they were happy with what was there, and I think we could probably find that quote in there. We're happy with our neighbors. We're happy with what's there. We're more worried about what's going to be there in the future, and what's there now was there then.
now when you say they were happy with, you're talking about the neighbors, the
The neighborhoods,
residents?
yeah, the 50 people that showed up.
And maybe, you know, we've talked about this, maybe the right thing to do here is do we establish something as a guideline for them to design to, but every single one of them comes to you guys in a specific use office building, every time? Because, you know, those people will get public noticed because we are putting this out. It actually went out today to the PO for White and Comas and Snyder Eye Clinic. So all the adjoining neighbors will have the opportunity to come and speak at that meeting and to you guys before then too. And maybe that's the right thing to do, is just take them on a case by case. Every single one comes to you guys. I mean, that's up to you guys on how you want to deal with that.
Well, there's not that many specific use office
No.
buildings out there, and they
I
don't
mean,
change that often. So.
You just approved one today, and then this stretch up here, that's,
I was going to say one thing. When we put this in, I think we probably heeded to the side of caution and said, let's take a look at each and every one. Let's see how these work for a while. Well, it might be time now where we look and go, okay, we see how it works, and now it's time for us to decide what's the right sides. You know, if somebody says, I'm going to put a ground-mounted, non-illuminated monument sign, I don't think anybody ever, you know, much like an overlay district, the protection of an overlay district. But that's something we can talk about. But we'll hear from the people up there, like you said, and I don't think it was the signage so much. It was illumination and use that they were
Why is
mostly concerned.
illumination on a monument sign a big, quote-unquote, big deal? I mean, those are there now, and, you know, we do
How
have
long is,
winter time where our.
It'd be the
long
brightness
they
in an
sit, yeah.
R1 zone.
How long are they lit? you know? Do they get shut
Well,
off
the-
at 10 o'clock, or are they
well,
on all night long, or?
The thing that we have, and the way our overlay district reads, is that the illumination has to be kept shielded from the residential zone. So the way that all of these are set, if we took the language, some of the language out of the way to use your example, the overlay district, if we did an internally lit sign like this has a lot less light pollution than something that's shot at from outside.
In past years, even on where the Casey's is, I believe, over on 19th, where Cornerstone Lutheran Church is, we get complaints from surrounding areas if there's any light overflow. So that's the illumination or non-illumination has to do with that, and that's probably why we looked at it. But I remember the 2 complaints we had on 19th Street, that when they put the canopy on Casey's, their room is now fully illuminated at night, and it never used to be. The people behind Cornerstone, when they put the parking lot lights up, complained, and it just kind of one of those overflow areas you don't think, but I don't think the illumination or non-illumination was a deal breaker on it whatsoever.
So this specific use office area on 81 we're talking about, that's from like 14th Avenue down how far?
Let me open up.
Probably down to 10th Avenue almost.
So getting back just to the illumination again, does that mean that they cannot put spotlights on it either?
I mean, the guy sitting next to you might be able to answer that question better, but the illumination, I don't think it matters whether it's internally lit or externally lit. It lights light as far as our ordinance reads. It doesn't really discriminate which way it's lit. To answer your question, John, it's this area from where Crawford's is to, there's a residence here, but down to where White and Comus end.
12th, is that what that is?
Yep. Actually, I take that back. It's to this church, that Christ Church or whatever that is right there.
And
That's
did we
zone
have any
R1.
other areas in town that were existing specific use
The one you-
corridors?
The one you approved today on 19th,
Doug Mogg.
Doug Mogg.
There's very few areas that actually qualify as a, what I would call a specific use office building corridor. There's not very many places they can go. Most places you see them are C3 commercial and everything's fine anyway.
And the other thing is you have this church right here in an R1 zone, but they actually are, that's by an institutional provision underneath. They're allowed to be there. It's a use that's allowed in the R1 zone. So they actually are by the institutional provision of the ordinance.
Yeah, they're compliant. What's our signage ordinance say for them? In an R1 zone, I'm gonna put a church up. Can I put a funeral home in an R1 zone?
Yep.
Yes.
And I can put a clinic in an R1 zone.
Clinic, yes.
So what if I were to do that in just a standard R1 zone, because that's kind of what we mimic the specific
have
use, because they're in R1 areas.
Table 2 in your packet that came, and then you want to go all the way to the right and you'll see institutional, and that gives you the guidelines. Because you got the institutional A and it says, this column does not represent a zoning district. It applies to institutional and certain residential uses permitted in residential districts. Such uses include hospitals, clinics, churches, schools, government buildings, libraries, museums, apartment complexes, and retirement homes.
So if we put a church in an R1, we can have 1 square foot per 2 linear feet of frontage.
Yep.
Can be 20 feet tall.
Yeah, you can have a nursing home, religious institution, library, museum, and schools. You cannot have a clinic in an R1 zone by conditional use. It can be allowed in an R3 zone, but not an
Correct.
R1 zone.
Then maybe this is an appropriate question, but to Tim or Ken, do you know when 81 got reconstructed to the south, did the city have to make accommodations to property owners when stuff had to get moved? Like I'm thinking over by the elevator, by Foxy's, by the convenience store at the corner.
I don't remember any of those signs having to be moved over there. Those are zoned differently, but I don't remember any of those having to be moved. They probably just got lucky and they were in the right spots.
So at this point, our ordinance has said each one comes to us. I'm sure that was a safety net we put under that to appease everyone that was involved at the time. So these future ones will still come to us. What we have to do is we'll decide whether or not what they've had is good enough, or do we want to change the ordinance to limit it to something other than by our whim.
Maybe the thing to do is after these next two get considered, at this next meeting that we're gonna have and see what the feedback of the neighborhood is, see what the design of these are. Maybe that will kind of give us some really good insight to what the sign ordinance should be. Because if nobody has an issue with what's being proposed and that gets approved, then maybe that's how we should write the ordinance to allow for that type of.
I agree.
Do you anticipate any issues north of 14th Avenue? With signs up
That's
there?
all commercially zoned,
So
so, yep. Actually, even on the other side there, Foursquare Church, they have to move theirs too, and they'll fall underneath the institutional provision as well. So they don't have to come to you guys anyway, because they're not a specific use office building.
So the only major area that we're gonna have to be really dealing with will be 212 when they widen that?
Those are all, we don't have any specific use. Those would all be in a commercial zone.
Yeah, but there's billboards and stuff like that. that
Oh,
may or may
right.
not-
There's gonna be a lot of
Yeah.
sign issues there. There's
That-
no doubt
You
about
mean the
that.
sunsetting?
Yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah, and that's a pretty big discussion for another day, but I think out of this stretch, there's 4 properties, 5 properties, I take that back, cause you'd have the 2 funeral homes, the one that came to you guys that we changed for, which was the old Turback Law Building, and I know they'd like to put a sign up at some point too, so we need to establish something up there.
Is this gonna set any protocol for the 212? What's being done here? Will that, if we don't? I'm just trying to think about how that,
Yeah,
you know, if you come, we had it here tonight, somebody said, well, you've got driveways there and you've got all these, you know, so.
I'd argue, Dan, yeah, what? I say everything we do every day seems to be a precedence. You know, not long ago, we were told, well, how'd you let the guy across the street do it? You know, so everything's a precedence, and yeah, the sunsetting mindset is the, you know, if not now, when? That's gonna be the mindset that we're gonna cross up here, we're gonna cross it on 212. We're gonna cross it next time a building permit comes in on a property that doesn't have a road paved next to it.
These are gonna be a pretty small sign they're gonna be proposing and approved, so I don't know, that'll affect it a lot on 212, because those are allowed much bigger signs. But it's something to definitely think about as, you know, what do we want it to look like? And if, you know, this area is pretty clean up here with signage and things, in the buildings, and if that's what we want the rest to look like, maybe we need to change some of the ordinance. I mean, that's up to a bigger group than me.
All right, anybody have anything else for Tim?
Jeff has something else. Nothing more on this.
Old business? All right.
Thank you.
Yeah. Sorry, guys. We've received 2 plats in the recent week or two, and they were both plats that the first one's Gulfview Estates. Let me take us there. Thought I had a saved spot. The last couple of plats that we've gotten here have been approved administratively. They probably shouldn't have, because the preliminary plan has expired, but we just kind of want to bring it to you that we got a plat for 1 lot right here, and you know, we want to just bring this stuff up to you guys, since it did have a preliminary plan and they have followed it, but that preliminary plan has expired because it's been more than 3 years since it was approved.
Probably been 15 years.
Yeah.
The reason that they expire is to give the opportunity for the Plan Commission to review and incorporate new regulations such as the Clean Water Act Stormwater Rule, which was passed after both of these preliminary plans were approved, and we have no provisions whatsoever in either of these preliminary plans for water quality facilities. And so I'm suggesting that you either approve the plat or ask to see the preliminary plan.
Is it a plat for just 1 lot?
It is, and that's how they've been coming in with this. Gulfview Estates does 1 lot at a time. As soon as someone wants to buy it, they plat it.
Yep.
But it's part of a larger subdivision plan, which requires a water quality facility, anything over an acre.
How large was that original preliminary plan for that area?
That's this plan right here. It includes 37th Street, 12th Avenue North, and 36th Street West. So it's,
Where's the lot on there that was coming in 25, 26,
Number 9?
or 10?
it was number 10 right here. The lot, I'll pull the plat back up.
So option one is to
Oops, wrong plat.
continue as we have and let them plat one lot at a time. Option two would be have them refile a new preliminary plan.
We can update the preliminary plan if you'd like to see that. The infrastructure's all in. But the Clean Water Act requires whenever an acre is exceeded of impervious surface, that water quality facility goes in. So if you took the time when that law became effective, they probably haven't exceeded an acre of impervious surface yet. It's just rooftops because the roads were already in. It would take a while to get there, and it may not ever get there, but that's something you could look
In a
at.
water control facility is what?
Water quality facilities
quality.
are
Is that a-
there's two types of water control, water quality and detention. And detention is a big facility, a big pond. Water quality facilities are smaller. They're intended to capture the everyday storm events and pick up the dirt and oil and grit that flows off of your driveway on
So-
a daily basis.
As you, the farther you go east there, that's pretty low, kind of marshy area down in there.
Mhm. They
And-
have a detention pond in this already, so the detention requirement was met. The Clean Water Act rule that was just passed recently is for water quality control. They have a detention pond in that open area, yeah, right there.
So in this case, they'll probably look to continue to plat the remaining lots on both sides of the street. Then at that point, that's all they had included in their preliminary plan they'd have to come in with. Do they have any intention of doing more than,
I don't think so.
there's no more land available
No.
to develop other than both sides of that street?
Yeah, both sides of 36 continue to fill in, and then the south side of 12th Avenue.
So what you're looking at is a recommendation from us to continue on allowing them to postage stamp plat this one lot at a time,
But
or
we already have a plan for it. The utilities
Right.
are in. It
Right.
could be administratively platted, except that you can only do that once every 3 years. One lot at a time kind of a thing. And when was their last one?
They had 2 plats last summer that were both administratively approved, so.
so you can only administratively approve one of these every 3 years?
Yeah.
And they
That-
did
that
one,
gives
they
you an
did 2 last
exemption.
year.
Yeah,
So legally, you can't administratively approve these.
right. So that's why we're bringing it to
So you're
you.
asking
can
us to
make a
tell you to
rec-
break the law?
No,
Okay,
you can
just checking.
approve it, and I would never do that. You can approve it or recommend approval to the council, and then the council would give final approval, and the signature blocks on the plat would be for plan commission and council, not city engineer. You can also make a recommendation that we keep track of the potential impervious area accumulating, because if it's part of a larger plan, it's cumulative until it reaches that acre. And we can track that if you like, and at some point go, okay, now you need a water quality facility. It could be as simple as dirt work in their pond area.
I look at the original preliminary plan that we approved and think, I'm okay with those lots continuing to be platted by the engineer's office, but you can't do that, so you're gonna say just continue to approve
We'll
the
bring
plat
them
and have them brought
forward.
before us and the council to sign
Right.
them as they have in the past. Anything more than what's on that preliminary plan would require them to come before us
Right.
anyway. Anyone else have any?
What,
Advisement?
Is there any way that can be changed so you can do 2 in a year? It seems a little silly to me. That
You
when-
can, but the city engineer can't. That's an administrative approval that can only be granted that exemption once every 3 years. When it's exempted because it's small, it's only one lot.
In order to change that, we'd have to change the
The ordinance.
the
would have to
ordinance,
change.
and it's a safety net to prevent
But so,
It's not that
the wild, wild
hard to
west
bring
from
it to
upstairs.
you and then to the council.
Do we want them to make a motion? to approve?
Yes.
Any other questions? What do you need from us?
We need you to,
Do we need a motion and vote?
yes.
Okay, I'll need a motion to allow them to continue to, not necessarily allow you to continue, to just continue to bring it before us,
You
each
need a
plat
motion
at a
to
time.
approve the plat
Okay.
of,
Of Lot 10, Block 2.
Yes, it's a plat of Gulfview Estates 11th edition.
Okay, so we'll need a motion of Gulfview Estates 11 edition to allow the plating of Lot 10, Block 2. Need a motion and a second.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Stonebarger, second by Mr. McGuire. All in favor, say aye. Motion carries. Now, that'll go to the city council for final approval, and if 2 weeks from now another one gets sold, it'd come back
same
before us
thing,
just like
right.
this. Okay. You had one other thing, Jeff?
We had another plat in Dakota Commons. Here's the master plan for Dakota Commons, and then the plat for Dakota Commons is this one, and it's their 6th edition, and it's the same premise. We want it. You
It's an
guys to
expired,
recommend.
this is an expired preliminary
Yep,
plan
it's an
also?
Expired preliminary plan.
And how many have they platted in the last 12 months?
that doesn't matter on this because there's right-of-way being platted,
Okay.
and that can't ever be administratively.
Lee done. And so this is the preliminary plan that we see there in bold?
The preliminary plan was just up, and this whole plan
Okay.
was their plan from 2003, which has expired. And they're platting this portion right up here, or requesting to plat.
More than just one lot,
Yes,
one
Yes.
section?
yes, one section.
On this particular development, since it's mostly unplatted with the preliminary plan, I have no problem whatsoever with the way the preliminary plan is laid out. The streets are fine, the lot sizes are fine. I
Water
would say
quality
the
and
water
retention?
quality facilities should be addressed. And so if you approve this plat, you could make a recommendation that the preliminary plan be updated to include the water quality facilities. And after that, then I could do administrative plats with an updated preliminary plan. For 3 years, but they'd have to update it every you bring it back and you say, you want any changes? Every 3 years.
How much of that Dakota Commons has been platted of that preliminary plan?
Just a second.
You can turn on the preliminary.
How much of an inconvenience is it for them to, this is a plat that was put in place prior to the water quality issues. How much of an inconvenience is it to them to update it to?
I don't think it would be a
They
big
have
deal at all.
the water quality facilities are
Be-
built in there.
They could be
They would be
easily
required to add
incorporated.
detention. It'd be,
Right.
they'd be able to, I guess my question is, they would be able to incorporate it without losing any buildable
Right,
lots?
Right. My gut feeling, without looking at it, they've got a lot of open space, and that's where the drainage is. That's where the water quality
It was
facilities would
probably
go.
planned for that to start with, it just wasn't
Right.
called that.
Yeah.
Okay, and the area that is just to the north there, that's what they're bringing in right now? So
Yes.
they've got an awful lot of this preliminary plan hasn't been platted yet.
Right.
All right. You need a motion and a second to approve the plat?
Yep.
Of Dakota Commons.
Sixth edition.
Dakota Commons 6th edition. If we wanted them to upgrade to the water, to address the current water quality standards, we should add that into our motion?
Yeah. and
If we chose to.
Ask that they,
Update
renew
their preliminary plan?
Preliminary plan.
Prior to the next plat. I would say we approve this plat as it is. Prior to the next plat, we ask them to update their preliminary plan to include water control issues. Fair enough?
Yep.
That way we don't get in their way of anything and we give them some time. They'll know how long it's gonna take to sell those lots. They might say, we're not gonna plat again for 5 or 6 years.
I'll
And
make that motion.
Motion motion by Mr. McGuire. Second by Mrs. Johnson. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Need a motion to adjourn. Motion by Mr. Stein, welcome. Second by Mr. McGuire, all in favor say aye. Opposed, motion carried.